They called him the soldier president of a forgotten land. But within just 2 years, Ibrahim Traoré has shaken the very foundations of global politics, not with missiles or money, but with 10 projects that dared to challenge the old order. While the West talked about aid, Traoré talked about sovereignty. While others waited for approval, he built factories, farms, roads, canals, energy grids and schools, all powered not by dollars, but by determination. Today, nations are watching, analysts are warning, and history is rewriting itself. Because somewhere in the dust of the Sahel, a young leader is turning defiance into design and building a blueprint that makes superpowers nervous. This is not just development, it's a declaration. And these are the 10 projects that made the West tremble. There are moments in history when the sound of steel doesn't announce war, it announces a rebirth. And on October 10, 2025, that is exactly what echoed across Ouagadougou. The sun had barely touched the capital's rooftops when columns of armored vehicles began to move. The ground shook, flags snapped in the wind, and the people in silent awe watched the dawn of a new era. That morning was not one of fear. It was one of pride. In the heart of the central square, Captain Ibrahim Traoré appeared before his people and the army. Behind him, an endless line of vehicles glinted in the sun, more than 90 armored vehicles and tactical trucks, valued at 200 billion CFA francs, ready to defend the land and the dreams of Burkina Faso. This steel was not bought, Traoré said with a firm voice. It was earned with sweat, courage, and sacrifice. Because a free nation does not rent its defense, it forges it. Those words ignited the air. And for a moment, the entire Sahel seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. But the true rebirth had already begun 3 months earlier, when the agreement for the military reinforcement project was signed. Since then, the changes have become visible. Terrorist incursions fell by more than 30% along the northern borders. Humanitarian convoys, once hunted, returned to crossing the routes of Kayadori and Gao. The troops, now better equipped, recaptured previously lost regions. For the first time in decades, Burkina Faso walked with its head held high again. Not dependent, not fearful, but master of its own destiny. As the engines roared and the steel glittered under the sun, the crowd began to shout, Faso, Lafa Faso, Lafa Burkina is standing. And on that day, the iron spoke and the world listened. Steel is cold, but the pride it protects is hot, like the fire of liberty. When the sound of weapons faded, another sound took over the country, the sound of engines plowing the earth. The very same iron that once defended the territory now began to sow the future. In 2024, Burkina Faso began to transform. It wasn't with speeches, nor with promises, it was with machines. That year, Captain Ibrahim Traoré delivered 764 agricultural machines, tractors, harvesters, and trucks. It was the start of the Faso Mebo project, an audacious plan to mechanize agriculture across every region of Burkina Faso. From every truck, not just iron and fuel were unloaded, but the symbol of a silent revolution. In Koudougou, an elderly woman raised her fist and shouted, "My son fought for the homeland with a gun. Now I fight with this tractor." Her words spread like wildfire, because at that moment, the steel of the guns and the steel of the tractors became part of the same fight, the fight for total sovereignty in the fields and in the heart. The results came quickly. More than 5,000 farmers benefited. Production doubled in some regions. The time to prepare the land dropped from 10 days to just 3. The government called it the agrarian revolution of dignity. But for the people, it was simpler. Hunger was losing. Seeing the first tractors go into operation, Traoré declared, "A country's strength is not in its cannons, but in the hands that cultivate the bread that feeds the army." And so, the iron that once defended the territory now brought life to it. The engine of freedom turns in the field. Steel conquered fear. Now that same steel returned to the earth, not to wound, but to flourish. After the delivery of the agricultural machinery, the government launched a new goal to make Burkina Faso the wheat granary of the Sahel. A dream that until a few years ago seemed impossible in a country where the sun burns more than it warms, and rain is a rare gift. But the impossible began to yield when the seeds arrived. Under the National Food Sovereignty Program, more than 6,000 tons of wheat were cultivated in 2025, spread across dozens of hectares in the north and center of the country. The fields of Dorikaya and Tenkodogo, once marked by drought, turned into golden swathes under the sun. The images traveled the world children, running between ripe ears of wheat farmers, smiling at the sight of the first bread made with Burkinabe wheat. Experts called it a technical miracle. The use of solar irrigation, the reuse of groundwater and agricultural drones, controlling humidity and soil in real time. But the people called it something else, a rebirth. Traoré, while visiting the fields, declared, "For years we imported the bread of others. Now the Sahel eats what it plants." The numbers don't lie. 6,000 tons of wheat produced more than 8,000 direct jobs, created a 40% drop in flour imports in less than a year. And as the wind moved the golden ears of wheat, it seemed to carry a simple but powerful message. Freedom also has a taste. And here, it tastes like hot bread. Thus, after the iron and the machines came, the wheat, the sustenance of peace. And Burkina Faso, for the first time, began to write its future with what it sowed. After the wheat came the gold, not the gold of banks, but the gold of the earth itself. For decades, the mines of Burkina Faso enriched the world, but left its people in poverty. Convoys left loaded with wealth and returned empty of hope. But in 2024, something changed. The government inaugurated the first national gold refining factory, operated by the company Golden Hand and born from a simple idea. If the gold is ours, then the shine must also be ours. For the first time, the country processed its own precious metal on national soil. The factory, installed in the industrial zone of Kosodo, began by transforming waste from old mines, the so-called fine charcoal material previously discarded. From these residues, 44 bars of pure gold were born, weighing together more than 93 kilograms. It was a historic moment. The Prime Minister received the bars before the cameras, and the official seal of Burkina Faso was engraved upon them, a visible symbol of sovereignty. The factory has the capacity to process 298 tons of residue per year and has already allowed the country to recover millions of dollars in gold previously lost. The impact was immediate: a drastic drop in illegal exports, an increase in national reserves, and the creation of technical and scientific jobs within the country. Traoré declared firmly, "As long as our gold was refined elsewhere, our future was also being shaped elsewhere." Today, Burkina Faso decides the value of its own shine, and African analysts called the achievement the second independence, not political, but economic. Because every bar engraved with the name Burkina Faso is also a declaration to the world: the Sahel no longer sells its future. It refines it. A people's gold is not in its mines, it is in its courage to transform it. The gold secured wealth, but the iron continued to secure freedom. In recent years, while many African countries still depend on foreign suppliers for their defense, Burkina Faso began to do the unthinkable: produce its own weapons, ammunition, and armored vehicles. The project became known as the Iron Shield of the Sahel, a network of small national industries dedicated to creating light weaponry, surveillance drones, and armored vehicles built on Burkinabe soil. It all began quietly, with local engineers in makeshift hangars. Today, the workshops have transformed into actual factories, where steel is molded by young technicians trained at universities in Ouagadougou and Bobo Dioulasso. The result surprised the continent: More than 90 armored vehicles successfully assembled and tested. Local production of 5.56 and 7.62 caliber ammunition. Reconnaissance drone prototypes developed by Burkina Faso engineers. The robust, angular vehicles painted in desert tones began to patrol the borders. And for the first time, soldiers knew the equipment they used came from the very hands of their own people. Traoré summarized it in a sentence that became history. As long as the iron comes from outside, our independence will be made of paper. The initiative attracted international attention. African specialists called it a strategic revolution. Others saw it as an act of courage, a small nation challenging the monopoly of the major powers in the age of technological dependence. But for the people, it was simple. Burkina Faso stopped being protected and started protecting itself. The iron now had another purpose, no longer melted in silence in foreign furnaces, but hammered in freedom within the country itself. When iron is forged at home, fear loses its strength. After raising the shield, it was time to raise minds. Because a country that defends itself with weapons, but not with books, remains vulnerable. It was with this vision that the Schools of Freedom program was born, one of the most ambitious initiatives in the modern history of Burkina Faso, to educate 1 million children by 2030, starting with the most isolated villages in the Sahel. In the suburbs of Kaya, in the villages of Fada and Gourma, and in the valleys of Gawa, the sound of hammers now marked another kind of construction, schools of mudstone and hope. The buildings were simple but solid. They were built with local materials, solar energy on the roofs, and Burkina Faso technology. There was no luxury, but there was light, the light of knowledge. In just 2 years, more than 2,000 primary schools were built, 10,000 new teachers were trained, more than 600,000 children returned to their studies. The rooms, once empty, now echoed with laughter and songs in Mure Fulfulde and French. In every scribbled notebook, the history of a country that decided not just to survive, but to think, was being written. Traoré visited one of these schools and told the students, "Iron protects the body, but knowledge protects the future." And the images traveled the world, the captain, his uniform still stained with dust, delivering backpacks and books instead of weapons. African analysts called the project the second literacy of the Sahel. But for the people, it was simpler. The children were dreaming again. And as the sun set over the roofs of the new schools, the message was clear. Burkina Faso is not just arming itself, it is illuminating itself. Freedom defends itself with steel, but it is eternalized with knowledge. After the trees came the movement, not of the winds, but of light paws leaping among the bushes. It was the start of one of the Sahel's most daring initiatives, the Army of Rabbits, the Army of Silent Regeneration. The plan seemed simple, almost poetic. Introduce 1.2 million rabbits into arid and desertified areas of northern Burkina Faso to restore the soil and create a new ecological balance. But behind the simplicity was science. Environmental engineers discovered that the constant movement of the rabbits digging burrows, mixing the soil, and spreading seeds could accelerate soil recovery up to 3 times faster than artificial reforestation methods. Local communities received the first batches in 2025. In Sebadori and Marcoye, thousands of cages were opened. The rabbits ran toward the dry horizon and began their work. In a few months, the results were surprising. Vegetation began to sprout again in regions considered sterile. The soil started to retain more water. Birds returned, attracted by the new micro-ecosystem. And as always, Traoré didn't just see an environmental action, but a symbol. Even the smallest of beings can transform the biggest of deserts. Freedom begins with what we have, and we have courage. The project grew, integrating with the Great Green Wall Plan, transforming the rabbits into natural allies of reforestation and local agriculture. Families learned to breed, protect, and use the animals' manure to fertilize the land. Suddenly, the landscape changed. Where there was once silence and dust, now there was life, movement, color. The elders called the phenomenon the dance of the desert. And the people understood not every revolution needs steel. Some just need pause and patience. When life returns to running over the sand, the desert has already begun to lose. When the earth breathed again, the country heard a new call, the call of the water. Without it, neither the iron, nor the wheat, nor the trees could last. And that is how one of the Sahel's most inspiring projects was born, the Lakes of Hope. Launched in 2023, the program had a goal that seemed utopian, to create 300 artificial lakes and restore 100 natural reservoirs by 2030. Not with foreign machines, but with Burkina Faso intelligence, ecological engineering, solar energy, and the collective work of thousands of volunteers. Around Seba Garam, and Dori, the dry ground began to shake under the excavators that opened the first canals. Men, women, and young people worked side by side. It was not just an environmental project, it was a fight for survival. When the first rains arrived, something miraculous happened. The valleys, once cracked by drought, transformed into mirrors of blue water. The banks began to flourish. Frogs sang again. The sacred crocodiles of Bazou, in decline for decades, began to multiply again. In time came the gardens and the fish. Families cultivated tomatoes, okra, and onions on the fertile banks, while young people practiced fish farming with tilapia and catfish. In 6 months, soil moisture increased by 35%, and local temperatures dropped by up to 2 degrees Celsius, a feat no international conference had achieved. Women, once forced to walk miles in search of water, now filled their buckets just a few feet from home. Children played on the banks again, and the elders said with pride, "Water is the mother of the earth. Without it, even iron rusts." During the inauguration of the first lake in Goram, Captain Traoré stood in silence for a few seconds, watching the sunset reflected in the calm water. Then he just said, "Where there was dust now, there are mirrors. Africa is not drying up, it is being reborn." These words crossed borders. Niger and Mali announced similar plans inspired by the Burkina Faso Modela model of reconstruction with their own hands. Today, seen from the sky, the lakes form a blue constellation over the Sahel. Each point of water is a victory. Each reflection is a reminder that hope can be excavated from the earth itself. And when the wind blows over the calm waters, it seems to whisper an ancient truth. When the water returns, the desert forgets its name. After the water came the green. Not the green of flags or uniforms, but the green of life itself. In 2022, Burkina Faso officially entered the heart of the Great Green Wall Project, a continental initiative to halt the advance of the desert and transform the Sahel into a belt of forests, gardens, and hope. But within Burkina Faso borders, the plan acquired another name, the Green Army. The concept was simple and grand at the same time, to use trees as soldiers, roots as weapons, and the patience of the people as strategy. In collaboration with the Sahel Alliance and African environmental organizations, the government outlined a plan to plant 20 million trees by 2030, creating ecological corridors that would cross the regions of Kaya Seba and Dori, connecting them to Mali and Niger like a living wall. The execution began silently, but relentlessly. In just 1 year, 3 million seedlings were planted with solar-powered irrigation. Local communities participated with pride. Women dug holes, children carried buckets, and the elders prayed before each planting, because they knew that every tree was a promise made to the land. The results were visible even from space. Satellite images showed green strips growing 15% in the north of the country, in areas previously marked as dead land. Biodiversity began to pulse again. Butterflies, birds, and small mammals reappeared. The soil started to retain water. The microclimate cooled by an average of 1.5 degrees Celsius, less in arid zones. During a symbolic ceremony, Kaya Traoré planted the 1,000th tree with his own hands and declared, "The desert advances quickly, but hope advances with roots." The words ran through Africa. Young people from Senegal, Chad, and Ethiopia began to call the movement the New Green Independence. The Green Army has no generals or weapons, but its ranks are formed by millions of hands and hearts. And every tree planted is a trench against hunger, heat, and oblivion. Today, when the wind blows over the acacia fields, the sounds are no longer of despair, they are of resistance. And the Sahel, for the first time in centuries, begins to breathe in unison. Iron protected the body of Africa, but it is the trees that will protect its soul. After the trees, after the water, after the bread, it remained to heal what no harvest could restore: the body and soul of the people. For decades, hospitals in Burkina Faso were few and far between. Women gave birth on dirt roads, doctors treated patients under makeshift tents, and simple diseases claimed too many lives. But in 2025, a new promise was made. The government launched the National Health and Dignity Program with the goal of building 55 new regional hospitals and modernizing more than 300 health centers by 2030. Each hospital would be a fortress of life, powered by solar energy, equipped with Burkina Faso technology, and supported by doctors trained within the country. Construction began in Wahiguya Kaya and Tenkodogo. In less than a year, the first hospitals began to rise from the red soil. The corridors still smelled of fresh cement, but they already echoed with nurses' footsteps and the cries of newborns, the first to be born under a roof of sovereignty. 2,500 new health professionals were trained in partnership with African universities. Vaccination campaigns reached 92% of children in rural areas. Maternal mortality dropped 30% in just 2 years. During the inauguration of the Kaya National Hospital, Traoré walked through the wings and said softly, almost to himself, "Steel defended our soil. Now it's time to defend our blood." The cameras captured the moment. The captain who once carried a rifle now held golden scissors to cut the red ribbon. And behind him, the people shouted, Faso Lafa Burkina is standing." The horizon of healing became the symbol of a new kind of power, not the power to dominate, but the power to care. Because no revolution is complete until the people can live to see it flourish. Today, as the sun sets over the new hospital domes, the golden reflections in the windows blend with the shine of the harvests and the green of the trees. And the entire country seems to breathe in unison longer as a nation in struggle, but as a people who survive to be reborn. A nation's future is not measured by the size of its armies, but by the strength of its hearts that still beat. If this story touched your heart, leave your comment. What inspires you most about the reconstruction of Burkina Faso? Subscribe and share. The rebirth of a nation deserves to be heard by the world.